This episode is for college students who want to break into VC. The way you build communities as a VC is one of the best in the startups world. And now you're a VC at Panache Capital. You're also one of the most creative and youngest VCs I've met. Christian, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Zhuo, for having me. It's a pleasure and happy to share some tips.
Let's go back to really the start of your journey. What was the first time you even heard of venture capital?
I came to university, like most college students, very unsure of my path. And, I was in a program that was multidisciplinary where I managed to study subjects like economics, computer science, entrepreneurship. So I kind of got the gist of everything. But it wasn't kind of until I found this organization called Front Row Ventures and actually working on the startup side in non-technical operations roles that I realized that the people that were allocating capital were these so-called venture capital investors. And I thought it was really interesting in the concept of how does one make a decision to invest in a company or not to invest in a company. And so that's kind of my curiosity that sparked me. And so I spent, a good portion of my time in university to try to break into as many opportunities as I could through internships, um, scouting programs and things like that to really understand this whole like space of venture, which I think in university, unless you do like a specific class on it, it's not really taught as much. And so I was really curious about that.
And it's really amazing how, university is such a great space for you to just like freely do things and really have like not much risk at all. So you really took advantage of that where you're like, okay, I'm gonna make use of this time as much as I can, really just leverage this time and find like what I truly love. And you found that VC was your thing. So from the beginning of that journey to discovering VC all the way to right now, could you talk about that journey?
I like to kind of dial it back. So as I mentioned, I worked in operations and business operations roles at a few startups early on. And so that gave me the exposure of understanding, how, companies are built 0 to 1. And I think what was really interesting in those cases was, I think, being able to kind of meet investors at conferences and as we were trying to fundraise and things like that, it was interesting to see how do these investors invest, like how does the mechanic of a deal work. And so I progressed into kind of working from startups. I started working in ventures. So my first opportunity in the so-called venture capital world was at this student fund called Front Row Ventures. And so they're similar to the model in the US called Dorm Room Fund. And essentially they have a micro fund of $5 million to invest exclusively in student run startups based in Canada. And I was very fortunate to join them in my first year of college. And I was doing a very operational role, platform role at first. So kind of doing a lot of operations, sales and account management, and then progressed to doing investments at that fund and then portfolio support. So I really got the full 360 view of different functions of a VC firm, where you'll have platform team members that do finance and operations. You'll have the investors that are more front facing, and then you have like the portfolio support kind of function as well. And so I got to do all of those at that student fund. And that was an amazing experience because although, it being student focused, it was still real capital being deployed in real student entrepreneurs around Canada. And so I was very lucky to lead a few investments myself, then spent 3 years there. And in between, was also fortunate to land a few internships at other venture capital funds in Canada on the East Coast. So there are two funds, namely Inovia Capital, which is around 2 billion AUM fund that does everything from pre-seed up to pre-IPO. And so I was working on the seed to Series A team doing venture investing. And then I joined, I think a year later, White Star Capital, which is a global multi-stage investment firm based out of Montreal, but they have offices in New York, Toronto, and as well in Europe and Asia. And so I was doing Series A, Series B deals there, which was really interesting, something a bit later stage. And so maybe to allude to kind of back to your question, like I had the opportunity to do very early pre-seed at the student fund and then slowly progress to doing seed Series A, Series B, and kind of understand that whole 0 to 1 on the venture scale. And then right now I'm working full time at Panache Ventures, where $100 million fund based out of Canada. We're I think, one of the only pre-seed seed investors that do pan-Canadian investments. So that's like basically coast to coast. We prefer to lead rounds up to 1.5 million, but also participate earlier rounds as well. We're agnostic, and so we do anything from B2B SaaS, things that have worked out well for us are in fintech climate. And so that's kind of where we focus on. So my journey has been a mix of doing a lot of, working at startups, going to do work at VCs, and then I worked at portfolio companies in between, and worked at a venture studio doing product management. So was very fortunate to all these different multitude of roles that involve the space of venture to be able to, I think, graduate recently and be able to do this full time. So that's more or less my journey long term.
Yeah, it sounds like you really did get the full scope where it was like, okay, so you've been in the startups, like you've done those roles, and you've also like done a bunch of VC internships in like actual funds and also like front row ventures. That's also an actual fund where it's like they have like so much people just like creating such a great community and they have deals and it's like you're working on actual physical deals which is like the most important thing ever. So during university you actually like leverage that and really worked out for you where you were able to get a bunch of VC internships and it's like maybe you started at like pre-seed and seed for
Yeah.
front row ventures, but then you also got the scope of like series A, series B. Now you know like, okay, there's no way, you know, if anyone tries to convince me to not do VC, I won't because I been there, I've done the hands-on and I know I love it. So could you talk about in your experience, who is VC not for?
That's a really good question. I think for me, there are a few things. I think the first is understanding the reason to why to do VC is very important. And unfortunately, I think nowadays, like because, I always allude to VC being kind of the banking of the early 2000s or late 2000s and where people are like, seems like a very prestigious job, seems like you're paid really well. It's a very sexy job. It's the dynamic of it, right? Like you are a capital allocator. People come to you. So the people have a misconception of that relationship and they kind of put it on a pedestal. And I'll say like VC is not for people that are only doing it for that. For me, for example, like my reason why for ventures, because I was so curious working at these startups, I wanted to understand how to become, a better entrepreneur in the future, or at least how do I raise capital? And for me, it was like so interesting to go on the VC side and understand that process of deal making from zero, from sourcing all the way to the term sheet, right? So I think VC is not for people that are doing it for the hype or because it looks cool because they think it gets paid well. If that's something that you really put on a pedestal, jobs like investment banking, private equity, sales and trading, consulting might be more suited for you if that's really the money aspect of it, I'm assuming. But at the end of the day, I think venture, who it's for, is really people that are in love with startups and want to be able to be in a position uniquely to be exposed to as many companies as possible, learn from amazing partners at the firm that built companies and seen companies scale from 0 to 1. And I think what I love about venture, it's really a job that you are almost paid to learn. And so going back to your question, so I think, it's not for people that are doing it because of the fancy title or because it's very hard to get in. It should be for people that are in love and are students of the game and want to keep learning about entrepreneurship and startups and how to scale the company if you're interested in going through the venture backable route.
Yeah, and the reason why it was like really hard to get in is because VC compared to like other industries, it's really relationship based. So it's
Mhm.
like you got to understand how to network and how to really be at the start of things, really creating the start and maintaining it. So if you're just like in the startups community, you're just like interacting with so much founders, just like Christian says, and you really got to love that. Like it's obviously, there's tons and tons of jobs where you can just get prestige and also money. So I honestly feel like VC would be harder than those jobs. Like if you really wanted that, then just like go and take a big tech job. Like that's probably gonna be more comfortable. It could be a 9 to 5, and VC probably isn't a 9 to 5. So Christian, could you talk about like what is your part in Planche? And also, like, what do you do in a daily basis?
Yeah, 100%. I think at Panache, like it's very depending, and I think this is a lot for a lot of firms. But I will say our firm is pretty on the smaller side in the sense of we have teams in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and Calgary, and what that means is I think we have maybe 2 to 3 people per province in the investment teams, and so the structure is like analyst, principal, partner across most of the geography. And the day to day, like you mentioned, it's not a 9 to 5 because, sometimes your staff on a live deal, you might, have to kind of put in the extra hours after work. Sometimes, some of your portfolio companies are raising a Series A or beyond, and you need to help them with their data room. You need to kind of, be there for them when they need help. And in terms of giving intros to other investors, or actually helping them with their data room and things like that. So I would say like I'll go first into like what the day to day of like a VC analyst is, maybe for folks that are interested, because I think it varies between the firm. To give context, our firm is like relatively smaller, so the structure is maybe not as big as firms that are doing 2 3 billion AUM or more. So firms that tier one VCs like A16, Thrive, or in the US, like those might be work that may be structured differently. So my day to day really revolves on a few things, right? As an analyst, if you think about the deals that come into venture like a funnel, right? You have top of funnel, middle funnel, like bottom of funnel, which is like when they go to IC and then you actually present the deal and you maybe go to a term sheet after that. Analysts really like stay at the top for most of it. Like that's your focus. And what I mean by that is my job revolves really solely at the first stance on sourcing and initial diligence because there's so many companies at the early stages, either through inbound, so either companies that come and message me or companies that I go and message, right, outbound. I will be the first person that passes through these companies. So I'll hop on a first call. I will look at their deck, or if they have a memo or a data room. I'll kind of do like a quick analysis that involves understanding the market a bit more, going on pitch book to see competitors, going on a call with the founder to understand like why are they building the business, because at this early stage a lot of it is driven by founder market fit, which is that founder the right person or the perfect person to kind of build this business to a multi-billion dollar business, right? So that's kind of my focus is really getting deals in. So it revolves around going to events, hosting events, meeting entrepreneurs. And then on the others, like if you go down the funnel, it's like deals that come down. I'll do around memos. I will do a lot of like initial Excel work, understanding, what the market is for that. I would do, scenario analysis to see if kind of we would have the right ownership at this percent based on the terms. And so there's a lot more other kind of things that we would do to analyze that. And then I think overall, like the day to day, it varies. So sometimes like today, like I'm doing a lot of founder calls. The next day, I'll do a lot of research on a certain industry that I've seen. Other days, I'm just doing full portfolio support and helping portfolio company that's raising a next round. And sometimes I'm at events the whole day, right, for conferences. So I think the best part of the job is that you are there's a lot of freedom to kind of pick and choose the day, and every day is different. But sometimes when there's like a live deal and it's like all hands on deck, that's when I think things get very beyond the 9 to 5. But I think what I love about this is like it's not. I don't see it as work sometimes, right? It's like you're being paid to diligence and learn, and going back to your point, like who is it not for? It's for people. It's not for people that don't find this fun or not interested in startups, right? So for me, it's like the perfect role. So it's kind of like the 9 to 5 more or less, or the 9 to 5 plus, or the day to day of what an analyst does at a venture fund.
It's really a way of life where you can actually choose what you do, but at the same time, it's like your job. So it's like you're getting paid, like Christian says, to do what you kind of love. And what you love is really helping entrepreneurs get funding or even just help with other stuff that they really ask for. And the cool thing about, Christian's fund is that they don't really have to push too much to get their deals onto the investment committee. I think your fund is a little unique where everyone really just get a seat in the table of really deciding like, hey, which deal should go through. So that's one really cool thing that I found about your fund. And you mentioned like you really are the first line of defense for Panache Ventures, where it's like, you are really like letting the really, really good founders through into the funnel. So could you really talk about, because I know that you have like
Mhm.
555, you have done tons of things with the community for Front Row Ventures. Could you talk about like how you build these communities? Like how on earth do you even do them?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think for me, what's interesting to give the listeners a context on 555, it's basically a series of demo nights I started before I even joined Panache Ventures in November of last year. And the whole premise of it was to basically be the catalyst for creators in Montreal to come together and meet new people and learn about different topics that people would demo about. And so we categorize creators as people that are entrepreneurs, builders, scientists, creatives, artists, anything in between, really. And I think the art of community building and what I learned of community building is that it has to come from a very like authentic approach. And what I mean by that is there's community building. So I think community building and event building is different. Like so I also host like, events that are networking events with founders and VCs. These are, I would say, like less community oriented, but they're more just one off or two off events to get people to meet each other. But with Five Five, it's really a community because people come back, people meet friends, and I think you're going there for the purpose that's not very, surface level. Like you go there because you're interested to learn about something that you might not see in your day to day job. And so that's why I think we built these demo nights in Montreal. We have 8 versions already. We recently collaborated with Harley Finkelstein from Shopify, who came and was interested and reached out to me on X, on Twitter to set this up. And so I think the reason why we had a lot of attention is really because we were being authentic and we were just doing it for the people. It wasn't because I wanted to get deal flow. It wasn't because, we wanted to do it for our personal brands. It was really, the raw point of it was because we wanted to create something for everyone. And that's how you build really amazing communities. So I guess the short answer to your question is authenticity is really what's needed to create these. And so I encourage people who are building or trying to build communities like myself to really like introspect on that purpose because the purpose and almost like anything in life, it's like you don't have a purpose, you don't understand that purpose, it's very hard to scale this or to keep it growing or being true to yourself authentic. And whether you know it or not, people can see through that. If I started 555 because I wanted to make the most money, people would have seen that, through me way back and probably wouldn't have come. But because three of me, Vilakshon and Simon, my co-founders of this, they know that we were there for a very authentic reason. It's the reason why people come into these events. So, and I think the byproduct of all this, right, like we mentioned, is that it results in good deal flow. It results in getting to know people. It builds trust in the community. And as a venture capital investor, it's very important because your network, and I hate to say this, but it's very cliche, but your network is your net worth. And a lot of the times people that come are actually entrepreneurs and they're building something. And so, after 555, I'll end up, having catch up calls or coffees with a lot of these budding entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs or actually current entrepreneurs that end up actually building businesses and that I actually get to bring to the funnel that we talked about. So I would say the deal flow part of it is a byproduct of just being authentic and just doing things for community.
Like Christian says, community versus events is actually quite different. Where if you want a community or even to just build one, you have to have a long term purpose, a long term mission, and you also have to be really, really authentic. Whereas, if you just wanted to create like one or two events, it's okay if just like a bunch of people come at once, but you're not really sustaining that. So, what Christian really did is he built something and it's on a reoccurring basis where people can just come back to that community and really just like have fun with the people they met last time. And it's always going to be reoccurring versus just like events where, okay, I never know when I'm going to meet this person again. So, it's whatever. But then, that's what it's so good about creating communities. Just a follow up, like how did it all come together? As in, like, how did you get all of these people to join? How did you guys even found it? Is it through
Yeah.
your network? And then how do you piece it together?
Our philosophy of 555, and it's very similar to kind of like us building a startup, is like we really thought about like shit first, think later. And I think the biggest barrier to a lot of people in general not, doing things, and they're like, I want to do this, I want to do that, but they end up never doing it because they tend to overthink and have a plan. And what we did was like, hey, like what's the lowest hanging fruit? What's the easiest event we could do? And this was doing a demo night with 5 slides, 5 people, 5 slides, 5 minutes to present, and 5 questions from the audience, which is why it's called 555. But a lot of our philosophy was let's just ship it. And so the initial, I would say almost not prototype, but the initial distribution for this was on Twitter, on X. And it was just us talking about, hey, Montreal, we're hosting a demo night. Who's interested? And so we kept posting this, and then with the algorithm on X or Twitter, more people saw it and they're like, hey, I'm interested. I've never heard about this. Like, how do I join? How do I attend? And so that just created network effects, right? And then, we send this to our friends, we send these to our colleagues. And Montreal being, I think, the ecosystem here is pretty small. Like, everyone can kind of know each other. Versus, I think, like a New York or maybe SF, where it's a bit, more ambiguous and bigger. That also played in our favor. And I think we also, before that, we knew quite a few people, most of us having been here for a few years already. That just helped as we kind of did word of mouth distribution and Twitter. So that's kind of how we did it. But to summarize, we really just shipped it out and we didn't hesitate. Let's perfect the design. Let's perfect the Luma page, the event page. Let's perfect the concept. We just shipped it out in November, and we've had 8 iterations since, and every iteration has been a result of us improving the last iteration. And so that's kind of how we started building 555, almost very startup-y, where we would kind of take the feedback, iterate, take the feedback again, iterate, grow bigger. And so we started at 30 people. And then we had to get a bigger venue because we had over 100 people come to our events. And then we started doing collaborations with Shopify and other organizations. And so that's kind of the approach we had. And that's kind of, I think, why we managed to scale to that extent for now.
And did you guys need to invite like I guess like well-known people or famous people, or was it just like every normal person who's just starting out doing business, interested in the startup world? Like it's just these guys who just came together and said like, "Hey, okay, I love that idea of 555, and let me just do it." Or was it like you also had to invite these famous or credible, a lot more credible, as in like a lot more successful
Yes,
people,
for sure.
uh, to do it.
That's a great question. So I think for us, like what sets us apart as 555 is like, the moment someone enters the door, your background, your success story, your seniority, it really doesn't matter. Like everyone comes in to 555 with equal grounds. The only common denominator is you must have the open-mindedness and the curiosity to learn about different things. And so people actually like don't even sometimes demo like startups, right? It's like the whole point of it is to accumulate creators. And so these could be people presenting about art. These could be people presenting about invasive plant species. It could be people presenting about AI and how it's going to change the world. And I think what we do differently is that we stay true to the curiosity of the mind. And that means, you don't have to necessarily come or be very successful or not successful. Like those things really don't matter. And I think what's unique about that is that creates authenticity because people will become vulnerable. They sit down and learn about topics they've never heard about before. And then I think, to your point, we started to gain traction on Twitter or X and these socials that it actually attracted these more successful or bigger audiences to come and want to collaborate with us. Harley Finkelstein from Shopify reached out to us on Twitter because he saw the movement and he's all for building community in Montreal. And that led him to kind of want to collaborate with us and come to the event itself. And so there are obviously, a few examples of that. But like I said before, like the focus wasn't to get the most high profile people to come in. Obviously that's always great. But the focus was to get people that came from different walks of life, regardless of seniority, experience in any field. But we wanted people to come in and embrace the uncomfortableness of learning about something that they wouldn't have. And I think that's the most beautiful part about it.
for our audience, what Christian is basically saying is that regardless, even without like, these well-known people or these people with very, very successful businesses, even without them, like it would go really, really awesome. Like it's going to be an amazing event even without them. So it's like if you really do want to build a community, kind of do what Christian kind of did, which is like post the idea on LinkedIn or Twitter and then see what catches on fire. And when the market actually reacts to it, that is when you have something special. And that's what
Right.
Christian and his co-founders did, where it's like they kind of just like, okay, let's make an MVP of this idea. Let's kind of just ship it, and whatever goes, it's whatever. If it doesn't work, then let's just try another idea. Maybe that will work better, and then do it again and again and again. But
100%.
they found it. They found it, and they found this community where tons and tons of people. It doesn't even have to be just about like specifically on startups. It could even be about like the craziest ideas, even artists, even like
Hmm.
maybe rockets or something like that.
Yeah.
Could you talk about for the people who wants to go to these events and join these communities, how can they do that?
Yeah, it's a great point. So my last advice on community building would really be, if you're, I mean, this doesn't even have to be community building, but just generally, like, if you want to start something, go and do it and tell people. Like, do cool things and tell people about it because that's going to let people know that, okay, well, Chris or his team are building something really cool. Um, and I think like what's really interesting is like we started just off a Twitter post that had maybe 5 to 10 views and like maybe barely people engaging with it, but we just kept posting and kept doing it. And you can allude this to so many things like building startups, building community. It's all around the same thing. My last advice on that point would be really go out there, do cool things, tell people, and start shipping like whatever you're doing, if it's a product or an event, whatever that is. Back to your point of how can people find these cool things, like I'm pretty biased, but I'd say like with whatever community you're in, I think Twitter is a place you could find a lot of alpha that you're not able to find otherwhere else. People don't realize that X or Twitter, like a lot of people are, it's almost like they're open diaries. And so for me, it was really interesting. It's like following these entrepreneurs, following these successful venture investors, following people in the community in Montreal or Canada that are doing things. That's going to lead you to be able to, see the different events that are being built here and there. Another thing that is pretty underrated is Discord servers. And so wherever you're listening this from, I'm sure there's like a Discord server with a community of people that are either building startups or doing really cool things that are in. So in Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto, we have different Discords here. So if you're actually from Canada and you want to join one of these like interesting Discords that we have, let me know. I can feel free to connect you and add you to those. But my whole point is, I think to find these events, there's a lot of hidden gems in these niche online communities like Twitter, Discord, maybe even Reddit. Go out there and search, and I'm sure you'll find something. So that's kind of my advice on that side.
And it's like VCs and entrepreneurs, they actually kind of started at Twitter and at X.com, but then now they kind of gradually just moved a little bit more to LinkedIn just
Mm-hmm.
because new entrepreneurs are, more focused on that. But yeah, it's like Reddit, Discord, go straight to the source of the people who already wants that thing. So if you go straight to for example, a Discord of entrepreneurs who is just like asking questions in the Discord channel, be like, hey, what event do I join? Bam, like you can literally just find exactly the people who want it. Or just like Christian says, like keep posting it. Like you're gonna find the right audience. And there's like tons and tons of people out there in the world. And once you really do, you don't need too much people. Really just like even 20 every single event, and you can build a strong, strong community. Could you talk about, because I know you didn't mention LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say, like, would LinkedIn also be a good resource?
I love LinkedIn, and the reason I do it's because I think still a lot of people are on there. So maybe to move it back, I guess more to venture and LinkedIn. I think it's a great place to shoot your shot and message a lot of people that you look up to quick coffee chats. And it actually is this one of the sole reasons I actually managed to, I think, break into venture and do many things I've done today is because I've been very proactive in reaching out and cold DMing people in the space or entrepreneurs. And so, for example, like the job I have now, Panache Ventures, it actually started because I messaged the associate who's now a principal at the fund 3 years ago, and the message revolved around I was a first or second year at university at McGill, and I was very interested in venture, and I wanted to understand, his career path. And 3 years ago, he was very gracious enough to, give me 30 minutes of his time. And we kept in touch for a few years. And, when the role opened at Panache, he messaged me and he was like, hey, we're hiring an analyst in Montreal. You're probably a really good fit. Like, let's see if this works out, right? So that's an example of like a use case of how LinkedIn was very useful for me. Another thing as well, and I haven't mentioned the pod, but I grew up most of my life in Southeast Asia and Singapore, and so I immigrated to Canada 4 years ago. And when I came here, I wanted to, I knew nobody, right? I came here, I knew nobody, and this was like in 2021. And so the only way I found easy to expand my surface area of people or connections or interesting people I wanted to meet was through LinkedIn. And so my first coffee chat ever that I did at McGill when I was a student was to this person that was at Front Row Ventures, and that's how I found out about Front Row Ventures, right? And my mentors that I still talk to here and there today, the reason I reached out to them because they actually were living in Singapore before, and now they're partners in venture capital funds in Montreal, and so I leverage that Singapore connection to reach out to them. And so that's why I say LinkedIn is still a very powerful tool. I would still leverage that to, do more official, like more formal coffee chats, but I can really see X or Twitter really almost coming very close to that as well. So I would leverage both tools. I would say LinkedIn is a bit more formal, and it's a bit more proper, but on Twitter or X, you kind of get the gamut of different things. But I would still use it to really shoot your shot in cold DM, especially if you're a student, because you'll realize a lot of people are a lot more interested or more available if you're a student because you're seen as someone with potential. And especially if you go to the same alma mater or the same university as them, it's very easy if you send a very nice cold message or a very well articulated message, there's a higher chance they'll reply versus if you're like a new grad or have been working for years because people want to get back. So you'll be surprised, like the people that you think won't reply or won't reach back out will actually do that. So that's why I use LinkedIn for sure.
And just like Christian says, it's really, really good to use a bunch of resources, as in like a bunch of media channels. Make sure you are really hitting both of them. Obviously, when you start out, focus on one and get really good at it. But at the end of the day, regardless of the channel you are using, you're really building your brand out there. And then once you build that brand, it's not like everyone just gonna come to you. Maybe you're gonna get some DMs, but it's not like everyone's just gonna come to you. Once you build that brand, that is your credibility. So once you have the credibility, you can go out and DM people, and then they're gonna respond because of your credibility. And especially if you're a student, that's like even better because everyone has been through it. Like everyone has had a hard time to find a job at some point, and they have failures. So it's like they understand it. And if you're a student, just like how Christian kind of got into Farmer Ventures, where it's like his Farmer Ventures people, really the people that managed it was actually from Singapore. So it's like he also had a leverage there and he took it, and which was amazing. And that's how he can get in. Could you talk about, you know, as a student, what are the resources in a university that they should really take advantage of to get into the startup space, VC space?
Great question. I think a few things, and I want to speak a bit more broadly because I know there are listeners that are not only from Canada. I think the first thing I would look at is not even like a resource, is like understanding that you are a student. Like you're resume, whatever you are as a person, you're linked to the university you're studying at. And so I've really leveraged the fact that you're a student at X university to go reach out to alumni that are in VC or in a space that you're interested in and go and coffee chat them, because that's the most powerful and the most beneficial thing I got from my university, which is really interesting to say. It's not the degree, it's not the coursework, it's not the grades I got. It's really like I was an alumni from this university and I had used that to reach out to other alumni, because I think that's already one connection that you can make and it's easier for you to chat to them. So first thing I would say is like leverage that student status at the university to reach out to alumni that are successful in the field that you want to go in and go and coffee chat them, go and reach out. Don't wait and sit there because you're not going to be a student forever, and really use that to the most max of your advantage. Second thing I'd really leverage from university that I wish I'd kind of done, well, not wish I would have done more, but I think university means, access to different things. Like, for example, being a student meant I could join pharma ventures. This means that if you're in the US, because you're a student, you could join dorm room fund. If you're in Europe, there was like baby VC in France. There's like a bunch of different VCs, campus fund. In Europe and in Asia, there was like in Singapore, Protege Ventures. That's a student venture capital fund. And so the advice I have is like if you're interested in VC, go and try to join one of these student VC clubs or funds, because that's the only way you'll learn how to deal make. And the reason I say that is I am a firm believer that venture is something that you can only learn by doing fully. Yes, in a later stage sense, you might be able to do courses that teaches you how to do waterfalls or Excel or cap tables and valuation models. But if you want to learn the art of deal making and seeing founders and analyzing the founders on a more qualitative basis, that isn't very easy to learn on a course. You have to really put the skills to practice. So that's why I really encourage people to join these student funds or clubs that give you the opportunity to be like an analyst type role and kind of get those skills. So if you're a student, join one of these clubs or funds that are in your vicinity, because that's going to help you a lot. In Boston, there's a few as well, and around the world as well. So please, I think, really join those. The last thing I'll say, like as an advice in terms of resources, I would say like there's a lot of courses actually at universities that offer venture capital courses, and that's, I think, to my point, helps you understand the basics and a bit more on the quantitative things. So at McGill, there's a really good course by Zhuo, who's one of the professors of finance at McGill, that has a McGill finance course. But I'm sure your university probably has a venture capital course. And I think what's interesting there is like a lot of these entrepreneurship venture capital courses will bring in guest speakers that are ex VCs or actually founders. So for example, my course, I took an entrepreneurship course in university as an elective, and one of the investors at my fund was actually doing a presentation about herself in my class, and that's how I got to know Panache a bit more. So that's an example of how you should really leverage those three things. So I'll recap them quickly. Go reach out, use your alumni or current student status to reach out to people that are in the same university or that have graduated or maybe 2 years ahead of you. Go and join a student VC fund that's in your vicinity or a club to understand a bit more if this is really for you. And three, go and try to leverage internal classes that teach about this kind of thing, because that also helps you get a bit more exposure and understanding about what the space is all about.
That really covers it, where it's like, online you have your branding, as in like, for example, LinkedIn, you can just post like, hey, I went to this event. Hey, I'm a student. I'm doing this right now. As in like deal making in my student fund or something like that. And then once you actually show that, you really show that you are, curious about venture capital and you really do want it. And most people don't do that. Like 99% can't even post a comment. So it's like stuff like that where it's like online, you can really, really do it. Like anyone can do it. And the second thing that Christian says, where it's like student funds or VC clubs, those are actually more common than you think. Like a lot of universities have like alum that just donates like a bunch of money, so then they can create like a small fund where students can literally just work on and just search up venture capital funds, associated to your university, and then you can literally just find that, and that's going to be really really helpful if you have someone to really guide you. Those mentors will be incredible. And the last one, I haven't really thought of it, but you're right. Like I've seen it happen where it's like your alums who are VCs, they love going back to their universities and then just like giving a little lecture or whatever as like a guest. And that's like the best way possible. So if you really sign up for those classes, those really entrepreneurial classes, you can really just like after class say like, hey, I really enjoyed your presentation about one or two specific points, so to show that you're really listening. And then say like, hey, can I get your email? Because LinkedIn is great, but email might be better. LinkedIn, you can obviously find them, but basically just multi-channel them, and then maybe even send them like deals that you think are great, as in like founders that are building cool stuff that you think are really, really good. Could you talk about, let's say they started this relationship with a VC. How did you maintain it? Like you personally maintained like a relationship with an associate who's like busy as
Mhm.
hell, and the only value besides like maybe potential deals that you can bring and the fact that you're a student, besides that, it's like students can't really bring too much value to these people. So how do you maintain those relationships?
That's a great question. I think for me, like it's interesting because I think a lot of these relationships, students, and this is networking in general, it ends up being very surface level, very transactional. But I'm a firm believer that the way a relationship begins and ends and evolves is really through that value add that you're both bringing to the table. And you make a good point that students might not be able to give value, but you'll be surprised, and depending on what kind of student you are. I was a student or like in university that I think happened to kind of be a connector. So I kind of like was in all these different spots and I knew people and I realized that my strength was always making an intro from one cool friend to another that I would have never met if it wasn't for me, hopefully. And so that translates a lot in venture because it's a relationship business. But for example, with a few, mentors or VCs that I kept in contact with when I was at school, it was a lot about, making intros for them or like, knowing that they were looking at a certain space. I'd send them articles. I would send them interesting things. I was also working at Fargo Ventures, so I could send really interesting student deals to them too. So that was another thing. Um, but I think another thing as well is just staying authentic, right? Because, my approach to these relationships, I had never, like the principal or associate that I was speaking to, who's now my boss, I had never once asked him for a job. I never came, my reach out to him was never like, hey, I'm a student, you work at Panache, give me an internship. It was more about, let me learn from you, let's build this relationship. And when you come off very non-transactional, you actually create very genuine relationships. And I think that's the biggest mistake people make is that they come in and they're like, I want an internship, I want a full-time job. And they kind of reach out to you, they send the resume without you asking. Like even for me, like I get tons of inbound of people sending me the resume, sending me like whatever, and like I want an internship, I want that. But like it just shows that like you're not very genuine and you just want to get what that end thing is, which is the internship or the full-time job, but you're not actually taking the time to get to know me or get to know each other to see if there's a fit. And so that's the biggest mistake I think, students make today is that they're very, sometimes unfortunately non-authentic, and it's not their fault. It's just like maybe they're taught to kind of be very direct. But in venture, it's a very slow moving game. It's the same as like I alluded to, founders that are very early or pre-revenue or just generally like, they're not going to come to you and be like, I want funding now. They'll maybe reach out to you, grab a coffee, you'll get to know them. And then like when they're going to raise, oh, like let's have that serious conversation. And it was the same thing for me with getting the job I have now. It was like, got to know my boss, Dominic, for 3 years. And then the conversation finally came when they were hiring. And I was fortunately enough to be the first person he thought about. So I would say, yeah, it's very interesting kind of the way networking kind of works in the space. But my biggest advice for students is try to give value, try to, try to show that you are able to do the job. And so the things I say very specific for VC is like, maybe show them case studies or articles that you've done before. So like, I think venture investors love to see your thoughts on a specific space. And so I think what's interesting would be really go and maybe write up a Substack or a Medium article about a space you're interested in, and go and read up about and go and write up about that, send it to them and be like, hey, like I wrote an article about, the insurtech space. I know you invest in fintech. I'd love to chat about it. That's a better way to do it than, hey, my name is Chris. Here's my resume. I'm graduating in one semester. Can I get an internship? You see how there's like a difference where one is like you're showing value, you're showing creative thoughts, but also just like being able to show that you're doing the work without permission, which is always a phrase I say. And so those are a few things I'd say that are really important.
Initiative is like the literally the most important thing in VC, where no one is gonna control your schedule. Like literally no one. Where it's like everyone else, maybe the partners would give you some advice on if you could do some things better that they see you doing. But like at the end of the day, it's like really you have to do everything yourself. And like, Christian says at Pash, he's get like tons of emails from kids where it's like, oh, just give me an internship. It can't be transactional like that. Where if you really just like send Christian, maybe, send him articles that you write about a specific space that he's really interested in, and then send him like possible founders that he might be interested in, and then also send him maybe like your thoughts on something that he might not know. Where maybe if because being young has an advantage where it's like you might know the space a lot different than someone else, and it's like for OpenAI, if someone uses ChatGPT, a 35-year-old versus a 19-year-old versus a 12-year-old, it's vastly different. So your opinions can actually really, really be important and actually add value. And even on the founder side, it's like you got to create that relationship because at the end of the day, they also have to choose who invests in them. So, Christian, what are the three top things that you look for in startups when you're investing?
Because we're so early stage at a pre-seed seed, I'd say it really depends. But overall, I think it's a lot more qualitative at the stage that we're in. And I think the biggest thing for us right now is, at least for me, it's like I look at a problem they're solving and I want to understand really, what is the pain point they're solving for the specific person or ICP they're targeting. And so I really want to understand, okay, like based on the problem that you're trying to solve, what is the solution? And then from that, extrapolate to why are you and the founding team the best people to build this business, right? And so we're always looking at founders that are thinking big, right? And what I say by that is like, we want these companies or these potential founders to think about this as a $1 billion business. If you're thinking of like, oh, I just want to do $5 million and that's it, like we really want to back the dreamers, the people that want to scale very large. And so a lot of the times, I think a lot of these founders are maybe thinking of more of a bootstrap business versus going fully venture scalable and being as huge as possible. And so like we always like to understand kind of why the founder is doing things, what's their purpose. Is it because they felt the pain point before and their background before that they've gone on to build something? And so to answer your question, like, there are a couple of things that come into that, right? It's like founder market fit. Are you someone that is able to articulate why you're the best person to build this into $1 billion potential business? Another thing as well that we look at specifically is like, unfortunately, a lot of it is like, is this market big enough for us, right? And so what I mean by that is like, as a fund, we have to evaluate this on an outcome basis. We need to understand is like, based on how many people there are that would buy this, based on how much you're charging, is the market as we see today, or and if we extrapolated 5 to 10 years, do we believe it has what it takes to have the revenue that we think will lead to a certain preferable outcome through an exit or an acquisition? So we also want to understand that as well. And I think just generally to wrap things all together, it's like really understanding, is that founder able to articulate why they need the money, right? Because a lot of people will come and want to raise venture dollars, but then are also unsure of what they're going to use it for. And so I think it's really important coming to a venture pitch at the earlier stages, like, okay, well, I need $1 million in pre-seed. I believe that we're going to need 800K if we go to market. What does that actually mean? Is that you're hiring sales or you're hiring customer success or using that for ads? So I think what we look at as well is like a clear reason of ask, because sometimes people might be raising prematurely that they actually don't really need that money now. They can bootstrap all the way until like it's like a need money or die situation, then they'll go and raise VC dollars, right? And so we always encourage founders to kind of think of like the purpose of the capital being needed. Do they need it now? Could they raise later so they don't over dilute themselves early on? Or, could they bootstrap and get recurring revenue without VC dollars and then prove enough traction or initial signs of product market fit before coming to us to raise VC dollar, right? So these are kind of a couple of things that we kind of look at this stage to make sure that we're betting, the best founders in Canada.
And I really like how you says they have to have a clear reason on exactly what they would spend. Where it's like, if a founder just wants like, $2 million in the bank for something that might happen, then that founder might not even be that good. Where it's like they don't understand that all the resources should be exactly how they should use it in their vision, in their plan. But sure, maybe plans might change, but they should know that, hey, we actually need this money rather than just want this money. So, Christian, obviously, he's gonna be really honest, and that's how he builds like the relationship too, where he's gonna be like, okay, dude, you can probably just bootstrap this for a little bit more, and then we're gonna invest in you or something like that, where it's just gonna be, a trust and really authentic relationship. Could you talk about, since you're really, really young and you're just like right off college, you guys at Pash have like a way to really just scans like thousands and thousands of submissions. Could you talk about like AI taking over VC? What do you see in the next 5 years? Will there be junior roles?
It's a great question. I think there will be junior roles because I think what's interesting enough is that there's always going to be a human in the loop to make these decisions, right? And so yes, AI used to quickly scan a pitch deck. It could be used to write a memo. It could be even used to automate the deal flow and kind of use different filters to segment. Okay, well they're not based in Canada, so we won't even put it in the list. So I think AI can automate a lot of the manual processes that maybe analysts or junior VCs are doing. However, I don't think it can. It can. I don't think it will ever replace the art of deal making, and the art of really having initial thoughts and discussions with the whole team together. What's really interesting at Panache Ventures is that we're a very, although we are there's a hierarchy in the fund. The ICs that we have, or when we have discussions about companies, are relatively flat. So everyone has a voice. Everyone has a say. Regardless if you're an analyst, a partner, a principal, an associate, you have a say in the company that goes into a potential investment at the firm. And so that's why I think, like, yes, although analysts are responsible for more top of funnel and sourcing and diligence, there will never be, I think, a time where it does replace. And this depends the fund, right? Like there could be funds that are solo GP. So one partner that has a 10 to 15 million small fund, maybe he or she needs this AI deal source or AI analyst to kind of go through a lot of the initial companies to replace that top of funnel. But I think that bottom of funnel deal making or decision making, I don't think it's ever going to be replaced by AI. Will it help us make better decisions based on more quantifiable comparables, or is it going to help us kind of speed up the diligence process? I think so. I think a lot of VCs now use Perplexity, GPT to help them understand the markets, do competitor analysis, market research better. But these are just tools to kind of be able to complement the actual work we're doing already. And I don't think it replaces it, but there's always going to be a human in the loop, in my opinion, to an extent. That's depending on the funds. But I do see it helping a lot of our productivity and making sure that we can kind of be faster and more on our feet. And so that's kind of how I think about it that way.
I even seen like when I talk to solo GPs where it's like they only started their fund. Obviously, they have limited resources because they're a smaller fund, but they really are getting like three inbound warm leads from the people that they know already, and that's why they kind of started the fund. But it's like AI is great, but like it's never gonna replace these human connections of like eight players referring eight players to the VC. And that's just never ever gonna stop. Where it's like Christian says, it's only ever gonna complement what VCs do. It might even speed things up so that they can make the deal go through faster for founders, which is a great thing. And it's definitely gonna help. So if you don't know how to leverage I personally think like if you don't even want to leverage AI, you shouldn't be in VC because VC is about learning so much new things. And on this topic, what trends are you seeing that is overlooked in the market right now?
What I find interesting now, it's not the like very application layer apps. Right? We see a lot of these kind of building very vertical solutions for specific things. I'm more interested now in kind of understanding kind of the infrastructure layer companies that are enabling application layer companies to start. And I think a lot of these come into kind of LLM tooling or maybe cybersecurity for LLM tooling. And so like how does one not how does one kind of manage these large language models on the back end to be able to scale and build application layer tools? So we're seeing a lot of companies that are doing lower level agentic tooling. So tools that help you manage basically how do you use specific types of LLMs to build apps within your enterprise that are a bit more horizontal for now. And so we are seeing a lot more of these kind of companies going into more vertical specific, for agent tooling for manufacturing, agent infrastructure tooling for cybersecurity, things like that. So that's what I've been seeing a bit more, at least on the Canadian side, and it's really interesting to kind of see that evolve in the next few years. So that's one of the things I think I've been seeing within the AI space.
And those are the things that really do have the hugest potential because, the person who does it actually has to have really good skills where it's like, if they're gonna have to know how to navigate like a huge company's infrastructure so that everything else can integrate, we're not really at that stage where one app, one chat GPT can really just do that. Obviously, we have Cursor that can help with that, where we can build like small tools and then engineers have to manually integrate it into the entire complex layer infrastructure of the big company. But we don't really have that. So this is like something that really do have huge potential. I know that you talked about, you know, breaking into lots of VC roles. Could you talk about how you broke into your VC roles? Entrepreneur First, Venturi Partners, Innovia Capital, White Star Capital, and Planche as an analyst.
Yeah,
What's the key reasons?
Yeah, I think key reasons is showing you're hungry and you have drive, right? Because I think at the end of the day, like there are hundreds of people that want the role. Only one or two will get it because the funds are very small. You have to really understand how to stand out. And so for me, it was always like, how do I build my profile that's a bit less, by the book? Like for example, I didn't study finance. I didn't go to business school. I didn't study pure engineering either. And so like I had this very like interesting like inner layer of doing different things. And I felt like the best way for me to break into venture was kind of having a very unique background. So my strengths were really like having done operations and biz ops at startups, having also, having seen the other side of the table and using that to understand kind of venture. And I think with my slightly technical background, like when I joined these funds, it was always positioning myself to help out on the more technical diligence side, understanding these companies on the back end as well. And so I think for me, like the main thing that I think helped me grow into venture was putting myself in a unique selling point, but also too, I think just being able to be a connector. At the end of the day, it's a networking business. It's a who knows who business. And so if you're able to know as many people that are relevant in the industry, create those relationships, maintain those relationships, being able to connect two and two together, I think for me, that's the most powerful thing because you are able to, one, be able to call anyone you need that, might need help. And I think as a portfolio company, who might need help, it's like you're able to kind of give them support just by doing all these connections. And so I think another thing I would say, the last thing I'd say about what helped me break into venture is, being relentless. A lot of people reach out to me and they're in their last semester of university and like, I want to break into venture. Is it possible? Yes. Is it unlikely you will? Maybe not. I I knew I wanted to do venture or at least try to break into venture in 2022. It's now 2025. It's taken me 3 years of just continuous doing venture in the space, building relationships, under like getting to know founders and doing this everything we spoke about today, 0 to 1 process. It's taken me 3 years to kind of really do that. And so it's possible if you dedicate a lot of your undergrad or your time into doing it, you will break into venture. And I think to give maybe a bit more actionable items there for people that are listening, the most important thing is, I think, mapping out which funds you want to work at, what's the realisticness of that. Go and talk to these people, network, go and build conviction in the space, go and write about something, go and meet founders so that you can kind of refer those founders to VCs. And so the list is exhaustive, but these are examples of things you can do today to really increase that surface area of luck. Because at the end of the day, it is a luck game. Panache could have not have been hiring the time I was looking for a job, and I almost worked at a startup inside Panache because I didn't know they were hiring. And so it's a very time basis as well. So another thing that would be interesting for everyone to look at is understand when the funds are fundraising. When fund is fundraising, there's like a likelihood that they will hire a junior or maybe an associate in the role in that team. And so go and try to understand, okay, well, when is the fund fundraising? Can I align my graduation? Can I align my exit of a job to that? Because that's when they'll be likely to hire. That's also another trick in the book that people don't really know. But yeah, I guess to sum it up, like, you have to be relentless. You have to really want it. And anything in life, like if you want it, you put your mind to it, you put the time in, you're gonna get the role. If not, you're at least gonna increase the surface area of luck that will lead you to hopefully that VC role when you graduate or when you're after working for a few years.
And to sum that up, for a college student, what would be the 6 months? Month one, two, three, four, five, six.
Month 1 and 2, I'd start reaching out to alumni, people in the space, people that are investors or operators that have graduated from your university. Month 2, I would spend really time getting the basics. So doing like there's a bunch of YouTube courses or just understand like how does venture capital work? What's the mechanics? How does a fund raise? How does a fund make money? I think a lot of people actually don't understand how does a venture capital fund make money. Like it's only made money through liquidity events, through selling secondaries. Like you need to understand the business. Like how is this a actual business model for a venture capital fund? So understand the basics of that. Month 3 and 4, I'd continue to kind of, have conviction about industries, go research on startups that you love, go and write about industries that you think you're interested in. And then month 5 and 6, I would say go and kind of, scour the internet for jobs, go and reach out to people that you reached out in month 1 and maybe ask them, if they're hiring, but like more low key. And always continue that process of learning, and because it's a space that you can always learn about. So like there are a ton of books, Venture Deals or Brad Feld. There's like a ton of like resources online. Keep learning because it's a space that I'm still very junior in and I'm still learning myself. And so I think the cycle could start at 6 months, but it's always a never ending cycle. But that's what I would recommend for people looking to break in.
Now, for a few rapid fire questions to just wrap up a few words of your sentence. Ready? What is the best book you've read recently?
Yeah, I think I read recently The Tao of Founders by Guillaume Cassin, ex-entrepreneur based out of Montreal.
If you could invest in any startup from the past, which one would it be?
I really like a startup called Ven, shout out to Sod, based out of Toronto. They're basically building a one-stop shop for Canadian banking for SMEs.
What is your favorite part of working in VC?
My favorite part is like I get paid to learn. Every day is different. I get to meet founders. I get to help founders. I get to connect people that would need help for each other.
And what is one thing that people don't know about you and you would like to share?
Funnily enough, fun fact, I served in the military for 2 years in the artillery and as an emergency ambulance operator. I thought that was pretty fun. I did that after I graduated from high school. I served 2 years of military service and then I went straight to university. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and dude, you were one of the best soldiers. You've got like tons of awards, best soldier of the month, and stuff like that. So, dude, you've already got that military discipline that you really just applied to here. That was amazing,
Appreciate it.
Christian. For anyone listening who wants to learn more about you or your firm, what is the best place to reach you?
For sure. So if you're interested in you're a Canadian rooted founder looking for pre-seed seed investments, feel free to reach out to me. If you're interested in grabbing a coffee, reach out to me by email or LinkedIn. Apologies if I'm a bit late on the reply. I have tons of inbound, but if you send a really creative message, I should be replying super fast. But that's about it. And then I'm also on X, Chris Levan 24. I post about a few things there as well, more on the personal side. So if you want to see a different side of me from LinkedIn, feel free to go there as well. Other than that, you can see my personal website on my LinkedIn as well, and I'm always reachable by email or LinkedIn. Those are the best forms to reach out to me.
I really should mention that, you should actually create a blog like Christians. That really, really shows, an amazing journey that you had. And when I looked at it, I was like, okay, this guy's a lot more authentic just having this blog. So, out of everyone who are two amazing VCs that would want to hop onto the podcast?
That's a good question. I think you should look at potentially getting people. I know you had someone from Triptych Capital recently, Bertrand Deveux, great guy. I think you should maybe reach out to someone I know via Capital. I think they're a very very strong fund based out of Canada. There's so many people you could reach out to there, so I wouldn't maybe pinpoint a name or two, but I would love to have more Canadian funds. There's my good friend Matthew He, a good mentor and a good friend of mine from White Star Capital. I used to intern there. He's also full time there. I would definitely get him on the podcast. He has a lot to talk to. He actually did venture out of grad as well. He did front row ventures, and then he went on to work at different funds, and now at White Star Capital. So I would definitely get Matthew He on the podcast. So shout out to Matthew if you're listening to this.
Awesome. Thank you again, and thanks to everyone who's listening. Comment and question you want to hear from Christian or from our next guest. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to press the subscribe button, like, and share it with someone who's interested in getting into venture. We'll see you next time on Break into VC.